My phone buzzed at exactly 3:47 a.m., jolting me from a dead sleep. I ignored it at first. Nothing good ever comes from middle-of-the-night calls. But when it buzzed again with a voicemail notification, something in my gut told me I needed to listen. My name is Saren, and that voicemail would drag me back into a past I'd spent years trying to escape. "Saren, honey, please." My mother's voice cracked through the speaker, a tremor I'd never heard before. "Everything's falling apart. I need you. Please call me back." A pause, then softer. "I know I don't deserve it, but..." The message cut off. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Adrian stirred beside me, his hand finding mine in the darkness. "Everything okay?" "It's my mother," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years. Not since that disaster of a Christmas dinner when she'd announced she was disappointed in my choice to become an architect instead of joining Calvin's business empire. "What does she want?" Adrian's voice held a protective edge. He'd seen enough of my family's drama to be wary. "She says everything's falling apart." I played the message again, studying the unfamiliar vulnerability in her voice. My mother, Elara McAllister Hargrove, didn't do vulnerable. She did perfectly coiffed hair, designer suits, and thinly veiled criticism. "You don't owe her anything," Adrian reminded me, sitting up to wrap an arm around my shoulders. He was right. I'd made my peace with our fractured relationship years ago, built my own life, my own success. But something in her voice tugged at a part of me I thought I'd buried. That little girl who'd spent years trying to earn her mother's love while watching it being freely given to my half-sister. "Lyra." My phone lit up again, a text this time. "Lyra. Mom's having a complete meltdown. She's been crying for hours. I don't know what to do." "Jesus," I muttered. Lyra reaching out was even more surprising than my mother's call. The golden child asking the black sheep for help? Something was seriously wrong. I got up and walked to the window of our apartment, looking out over the city lights. Behind me, Adrian waited patiently, knowing me well enough to let me process. "I should probably check on them," I said finally. "Are you sure? Remember what happened last time? Last time, when I'd tried to help with their financial troubles, only to discover they'd used my credit to secure a loan for Lyra's emergency. The emergency being a spontaneous trip to Paris. This feels different," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure why. "Mom doesn't break down. Ever. Even when Dad left, she just got colder." Another text from Lyra. "Calvin's gone. Bank account's frozen. Please help." Well, that explained some things. Calvin Hargrove, my stepfather, the pillar of the business community, had finally shown his true colors. I'd seen the news articles hinting at financial troubles in his company, but Mother had dismissed them as jealous competitors spreading lies. "I have to go," I said, already pulling clothes from the closet. "Just to check. I'll be back in a few hours." Adrian got up and hugged me from behind. "Want me to come with you?" I shook my head. "I need to do this alone. Besides, you have that interview in the morning." As I gathered my things, another text came through. This one from my father, Ronan. "Just heard about Calvin. Be careful, sweetheart. Some people only reach out when they need something." Dad's warning settled like a weight in my stomach. He was right. Mother had a talent for manipulation. But as I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that this time was different. Maybe it was the crack in her voice, or Lyra's unexpected plea for help, or just morbid curiosity about Calvin's disappearance. Whatever waited for me at that house, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't going to be a simple family reunion. The grand colonial house looked different in the pre-dawn darkness. The perfectly manicured lawn I remembered was overgrown, and several windows were dark where warm lights used to shine. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed Mother's Mercedes was gone, replaced by Lyra's more modest Volkswagen. Something was definitely wrong. I hadn't even reached the front door when it swung open. Lyra stood there in wrinkled pajamas, her usually perfect hair a mess. "Thank God you're here," she said, pulling me inside. "Mom's been." She gestured vaguely upstairs. The foyer was a mess of scattered papers and open boxes. A crystal vase lay shattered near the stairs, water staining the expensive carpet. Mother would never have allowed this kind of chaos before. "Where is she?" I asked, stepping over a pile of what looked like financial documents. "Study." Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "She's been in there for hours, going through everything. I think she's looking for something specific, but she won't tell me what." I headed toward the study, my footsteps echoing in the unusually quiet house. "And Calvin?" "Gone. 3 days ago. He took some files from his office, emptied their joint accounts, and disappeared. Lyra wrapped her arms around herself. Mom didn't even notice at first. She was too busy planning this charity gala thing. Then the credit card started getting declined. The study door was ajar, spilling yellow light into the hallway. I pushed it open to find Mother sitting at Calvin's massive desk, surrounded by mountains of paperwork. Her designer outfit was wrinkled, her makeup smeared. She looked up, and for a moment, I saw genuine relief in her eyes. "Saren." She straightened, trying to summon her usual commanding presence. "Thank you for coming. I need your expertise with these documents." "No hello. No how are you?" Just straight to what she needed from me. Some things never changed. "What happened?" I asked, remaining in the doorway. "Calvin has made some unfortunate decisions." She shuffled papers around, avoiding my eyes. "But we can fix this. You're good with contracts, aren't you? Working on all those building projects." "I'm an architect, Mother. Not a lawyer. But you must know something about." "What did he do?" She flinched at my direct tone. "Nothing that can't be managed with the right approach. If we just..." "Mother." I stepped closer, seeing the papers more clearly now. Bank statements, legal notices, and something that looked suspiciously like a federal investigation document. "What did Calvin do?" She slumped slightly, her carefully maintained facade cracking. "He's been moving money around, playing with investments that weren't entirely legitimate. The authorities are asking questions." "Jesus Christ." I ran a hand through my hair. "And you knew nothing about this?" "Of course not." She snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "Saren, darling, I need your help. You've always been the practical one. Like your father." The comparison to Dad felt like a slap. She'd spent years criticizing his simple lifestyle, and now she was trying to use it as a compliment? Lyra appeared beside me, holding 3 cups of coffee. "I found some papers in Calvin's personal safe," she said quietly. "Mom, I think he was using your signature on some of these documents." Mother's face went pale. "That's impossible. He wouldn't." "He did." Lyra's voice was stronger now. "And I think he was using mine too. On the trust fund paperwork." I took one of the coffee cups, studying my half-sister's face. This wasn't the same spoiled girl who'd laughed when Mother cut me out of family photos. She looked scared. Lost. "We need to call the police," I said. "No." Mother stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. "We can handle this internally. As a family." There it was. Family. The word she only used when she needed something. But looking at Lyra's frightened face and Mother's desperate eyes, I realized this went beyond old grudges and hurt feelings. "I'll help," I said finally. "But we do this my way. No more secrets. No more manipulation. And first thing tomorrow, we're calling my friend at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." Mother opened her mouth to protest, but Lyra cut her off. "She's right, Mom. We need help. Real help." The sun was starting to rise, casting long shadows through the study windows. Whatever Calvin had done, whatever storm was coming, we'd face it in the harsh light of day. Whether Mother liked it or not, the FBI agent's office felt too small for the weight of what she was telling us. I sat between Mother and Lyra, watching their faces as Agent Chun laid out the extent of Calvin's fraud. "These signatures," Agent Chun said, spreading documents across her desk, "appear on multiple fraudulent investment accounts. Mrs. Hargrove, your name is on most of them, but we've also found Miss Hargrove's signature on several key documents." Mother's perfectly manicured nails dug into her armrest. "This is absurd. I never signed." "That's what concerns us," Agent Chin interrupted. "The signatures are forgeries. Very good ones." I leaned forward, something catching my eye on one of the bank statements. A series of regular transfers from an account I recognized, Dad's alimony payments to Mother. But the amounts were wrong. Much higher than what the divorce settlement required. "What's this account?" I asked, pointing to the statement. Agent Chun checked her notes. "That appears to be a holding account. Money came in from various sources and was immediately transferred to offshore accounts." "Various sources?" I turned to Mother. "Like Dad's alimony payments?" The color drained from her face. "Saren, I can explain. You've been taking extra money from Dad?" My voice cracked. "All these years?" Lyra looked confused. "What alimony payments?" "I thought Mr. McAllister stopped supporting us years ago." "He never stopped," I said, the pieces falling into place. Mother told him I needed help with college tuition, then medical bills, then a down payment for a house. "But I never saw any of that money, did I, Mother?" The silence in the room was deafening. "Mrs. Hargrove," Agent Chin said quietly, if you've been participating in your husband's fraud scheme. I didn't know. Mother burst out. Calvin handled everything. He said Lyra needed, and the lifestyle we maintained. I just signed what he put in front of me. And Dad's money? I pressed. Was that Calvin too? She wouldn't meet my eyes. You were doing fine on your own. Lyra needed. I needed it too. The words exploded out of me. I worked 3 jobs through college. I lived in a basement apartment with black mold. I couldn't afford a doctor when I got pneumonia. And all that time, you were stealing from Dad to fund Lyra's shopping sprees. Lyra's face crumpled. I didn't know, she whispered. Mom said the money was from Calvin's business. She said. She turned to Mother, tears streaming down her face. You told me Saren didn't want to be part of the family anymore. Agent Chen cleared her throat. Ladies, I understand this is difficult, but we need to focus on the immediate situation. Mr. Hargrove has disappeared with significant amounts of money. We believe he's attempting to leave the country. Let him, I said, standing up. I'm more interested in the fraud that's been happening right here. Mother reached for my hand. Darling, please. I was trying to protect. I jerked away from her touch. Stop. Just stop. You weren't protecting anyone. You were maintaining your perfect image, your perfect life, your perfect daughter. Well, congratulations. Hope it was worth it. I'll need statements from all of you, Agent Chen said. And Mrs. Hargrove, given these new allegations about the alimony fraud, I strongly suggest you get a lawyer. As we left the office, Lyra caught my arm. Sharon, wait. I swear I didn't know about any of this. About the money, about what Mom told you. I looked at my half-sister, really looked at her. The designer clothes and perfect makeup couldn't hide her fear, her confusion, her shame. For the first time, I saw past the golden child facade to the scared young woman beneath. It's not your fault, I said finally. But things are going to change now. All of it. Mother stood in the hallway, her composure finally breaking. Please, both of you. We need to stay together. We're family. Family? I laughed bitterly. You know whose family? Dad, who worked extra shifts to send you money he thought was helping his daughter. That's family. This. I gestured between us. This is just a lie you created to make yourself feel better. I walked away, leaving them in that sterile hallway. My phone buzzed, a text from Adrian. You okay? Need backup. I didn't respond immediately. The truth was, I didn't know if I was okay. But I knew what I had to do next. It was time to tell Dad everything. Dad's small house looked exactly the same as it had for the past 15 years. Warm lights in every window, a slightly overgrown garden, and his ancient pickup truck in the driveway. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, trying to find the right words to tell him how Mother had betrayed us both. Adrian's hand squeezed mine. Want me to go in with you? I shook my head. I need to do this alone. The screen door creaked open before I reached it. Dad stood there in his usual flannel shirt and worn jeans, his smile fading as he read my expression. That bad, huh? Inside, the kitchen smelled like coffee and fresh bread. Dad's solution to everything was feeding people. He pulled out 3 mugs, glancing at Adrian waiting in the car. He should come in too. Family meeting. Dad, about family. I stopped, watching him pour coffee with steady hands. Hands that had worked countless overtime shifts at the construction company. For me. Or so he thought. Calvin's gone, I said finally. He took the money and ran. But that's not why I'm here. Dad sat down across from me. I know about Calvin. It's all over the news. But something else is eating at you. I pulled out the bank statements I'd gotten from Agent Chen. My hands shook as I laid them on the table. Mother's been lying to you. About the alimony. He studied the papers, his expression unchanging. She told you she needed more for your expenses. You knew. I suspected. He sighed, pushing the papers back. The amounts kept increasing, but whenever I tried to give you money directly, you said you were managing fine. Why didn't you say anything? Because I thought. He rubbed his face. I thought maybe you were too proud to take help directly from me. That going through your mother made it easier somehow. The truth hit me like a physical blow. You let her take advantage of you because you thought that's what I wanted. I let her take advantage because I failed you once before when I left. His voice was quiet. I wasn't going to fail you again. A knock at the door interrupted us. Adrian poked his head in. Sorry, but Lyra's here. She followed us. My half-sister stood on the porch, looking small and lost without her usual designer armor. I had to come, she said. I need to make this right. Dad invited her in without hesitation, pulling out another mug. Lyra stared at him, then at the modest kitchen, then at me. This is where you grew up? Part-time, I said. when Mother allowed it. It's nice. She touched a framed photo of Dad and me at my college graduation. It feels like a real home. Lyra, Dad said gently, none of this is your fault. But it is. She pulled out her phone, showing us her banking app. I've been going through my accounts. All those shopping trips, the vacations, my apartment in the city, it was all paid for with money that should have gone to Saren. That's on your mother, not you, Dad said. No. Lyra's voice strengthened. I'm not a child anymore. I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't want to ask questions. She turned to me. I'm selling everything. The designer clothes, the car, the apartment. It won't make up for everything, but... Keep the car, I interrupted. You'll need it to get to community college. She blinked. What? If you're serious about making changes, start there. Dad can help you apply. Adrian, who'd been quietly observing, finally spoke up. What about your mother? The FBI will want to question her again. Let them, I said. She made her choices. Dad reached across the table, taking my hand. Sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is letting them face the consequences of their actions. I looked around the kitchen, at my supportive father, my encouraging fiancé, and my half-sister finally seeing clearly for the first time. This was what family should feel like. My phone buzzed. Mother's name flashed on the screen, along with a text. Please don't do this. I can explain everything. I turned the phone face down without responding. Some explanations came too late. The pounding on my apartment door started at midnight. I was reviewing construction plans when Adrian muted the TV, his expression tense. We both knew who it was before I opened the door. Mother stood there, mascara streaked down her face, Calvin lurking behind her like a shadow. We need to stay here tonight, she announced, pushing past me with a designer suitcase. The FBI froze our accounts. They're watching the house. I blocked Calvin from entering. You're not welcome here. Saren. Mother's voice took on that familiar manipulative tone. We're family. You can't turn us away. Family? I laughed. Is that what we are now? Because last week I was just the disappointment who abandoned you for a common career. Calvin stepped forward, his usual cold demeanor cracking. Listen, if you'd just let me explain the situation. The situation? Adrian appeared beside me, phone in hand. You mean the fraud? The stolen money? The forged signatures? You don't understand, Mother interrupted. Everything I did was for this family. To maintain our position. Your position, I corrected. Your lies. Your theft. I made mistakes, she admitted, tears welling up. But surely you can't want to see your mother in prison? The word hit me like a slap. Mother. When had she ever been that? When I was sick with pneumonia and she refused to help because it might affect Lyra's spring break plans. When she told Dad I needed money for medical bills while spending it on designer clothes. My phone buzzed, a text from Lyra. Mom's not at the house. Are you okay? Did Lyra know you were coming here? I asked. Mother's hesitation told me everything. She's confused right now. Being influenced by your father. You mean she's finally seeing the truth? I stepped back, creating more distance between us. Does she know Calvin's back? I found him, Mother said proudly. In Montreal. He came back because I convinced him we could fix this together. Adrian moved closer to the phone. I'm calling the FBI. Wait. Calvin raised his hands. We have a plan. A way to make this right. But we need somewhere to stay while we sort things out. Just a few days. I looked at them. Really looked at them. Mother in her expensive clothes, now wrinkled from travel. Calvin with his practiced businessman's smile that never reached his eyes. They were running. Had probably been running since Montreal. And they wanted to drag me down with them. No, I said quietly. What? Mother stepped toward me. I said no. I'm not hiding you. I'm not lying for you. I'm not helping you escape the consequences of your actions. After everything I've done for you. Everything you've done to me, I corrected. And to Dad. And even to Lyra, though you can't see it. You ungrateful. Calvin started, but Mother cut him off. If you don't help us, she said, her voice turning cold, I'll tell the FBI you knew about the fraud. That you helped us hide money. Adrian's hand tightened on my shoulder. That's extortion. That's family, Mother replied. I felt something inside me break, and then reform stronger. No, Mother. That's your version of family. Here's mine. I pulled out my phone and dialed Agent Chen's number, maintaining eye contact with Mother as it rang. You wouldn't, she whispered. Agent Chen? This is Saren McAllister. Calvin Hargrove is at my apartment right now. Yes, with my mother. Mother lunged for the phone, but Adrian stepped between us. Calvin turned to run, but the elevator was already coming up, carrying Lyra and 2 FBI agents. "I'm sorry," Lyra said as they led Mother and Calvin away in handcuffs. "I tracked Mom's phone when she left the house. I couldn't let her drag you into this too." I hugged my half-sister, feeling her shake. "You did the right thing." "Did we?" she asked softly. I watched Mother looking back at us as the agents led her away, her expression a mix of betrayal and disbelief. For the first time, I felt no guilt, no doubt, no lingering need for her approval. "Yes," I said. "We did." The courthouse hallway felt endless as I walked toward the hearing room. Mother's preliminary trial was today, and I was the key witness. Adrian squeezed my hand before letting go. He couldn't come in with me. "Remember," Agent Chen said quietly, "just tell the truth." The truth. If only it were that simple. Inside, Mother sat beside her lawyer, wearing a conservative navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She'd lost weight in the month since her arrest, her cheekbones sharper than ever. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. I looked away, finding Lyra in the gallery. She gave me a slight nod, her face pale but determined. We'd both been subpoenaed to testify about the fraud, the forged signatures, the years of financial manipulation. "Please state your name for the record," the prosecutor began. "Saren McAllister." "And your relationship to the defendant?" I hesitated, meeting Mother's gaze. "She's my mother." The questions came rapidly after that. "Yes, I knew about the alimony payments." "No, I never received the money." "Yes, I struggled financially through college." "No, I didn't know about the fraud until recently." Then Mother's lawyer stood up. "Miss McAllister, isn't it true that you benefited from your mother's financial support during your childhood?" "Objection," the prosecutor called. "Relevance goes to establishing the family dynamic, Your Honor." "I'll allow it." I gripped the witness stand. "My father supported me. Mother spent his money on Lyra. But you lived in their house, correct? Attended private school? Enjoyed a privileged lifestyle. Until she kicked me out at 17. Mother flinched. Her lawyer pressed on. "And why were you asked to leave?" "Objection." The prosecutor stood. "Outside the scope. Your Honor, the defense is establishing a pattern of family conflict that led to misunderstandings about financial arrangements. I'll allow it, but tread carefully." The lawyer turned back to me. "Why did you leave home, Miss McAllister?" I felt the old shame rising. "Because I refused to lie to federal investigators about Calvin's business practices." A murmur went through the courtroom. Mother's face went white. "So you were aware of potential illegal activities as far back as 13 years ago?" "I was 17 and scared. Mother told me it was just a misunderstanding, that Calvin needed me to sign some papers." "But you knew something was wrong, didn't you? Yet you never reported it. Never warned your sister Lyra. Never told your father his money was being misused. Why?" I saw where this was going. They were going to paint me as complicit, as someone who only spoke up when it benefited me. "I was a child," I said, my voice shaking. "She was my mother. I trusted her. And now that trust is gone?" He smiled slightly. "Or is this revenge for years of perceived slights?" "Objection. Withdrawn." He turned back to his notes. "One final question. If you were so concerned about your father's money being misused, why didn't you tell him years ago?" The truth hit me like a physical blow. I could have told Dad, could have stopped this years ago, but I'd stayed silent, hoping somehow Mother would change, would finally see me as worthy of her love. "Because I was weak," I whispered. "I'm sorry, could you speak up?" "Because I was weak." The words echoed through the courtroom. Because every time I tried to stand up to her, she reminded me I was nothing without her. Because she made me believe I deserved less than Lyra. Because I stopped, realizing I was crying. No further questions. As I stepped down, Mother caught my arm. "I did it all for you," she whispered. "To make you stronger." I jerked away, nearly running from the courtroom. In the hallway, Adrian caught me as my legs gave out. "She's going to get away with it," I gasped. "They're going to blame me, and she's going to get away with everything." Lyra appeared, her face set. "No, she won't. Because it's my turn to testify next. And I have proof of everything." But as the bailiff called Lyra's name, Mother's lawyer stood up with a new motion. Whatever he said made the judge frown and call for a recess. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. The judge's chambers felt suffocating. Mother sat across from me, her lawyer hovering nearby, while Agent Chen stood by the door. Lyra's evidence, a hidden recording of Calvin admitting to the fraud, had been thrown out on a technicality. Now Mother's lawyer was pushing for a deal. "Full immunity," he said smoothly, "in exchange for information about larger financial crimes within Calvin's organization. And my clients walk away clean, Mother added, her voice soft but triumphant. All charges dropped. I stared at her perfectly manicured hands, folded neatly on the table. Those hands that had pushed me away countless times, that had signed away Dad's money, that had built a wall between sisters. There's just one small detail, her lawyer continued. We need Miss McAllister to amend her testimony, to clarify that she was aware of and participated in some of the financial arrangements. The room went silent. Even Agent Chin straightened. You want me to lie? I asked. To take the fall. To help your family, Mother corrected. One small statement, and this all goes away. We can be whole again. I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Whole? When were we ever whole? Saren, please. She reached for my hand. I pulled away. Think about Lyra. Her future. One mistake shouldn't ruin her life. Like you ruined mine? I made you stronger. You made me hate myself. The words echoed off the wood-paneled walls. Mother's facade cracked, just for a moment, showing something raw underneath. Everything I did, she whispered, was to give you both the best life possible. No. I stood up, my chair scraping back. Everything you did was to maintain your image, your status, your control. The door opened. Lyra stood there, tears streaming down her face. I heard everything. Mother's expression shifted instantly to concern. Darling, you shouldn't be here. Stop. Lyra's voice was stronger than I'd ever heard it. Just stop lying. For once in your life, tell the truth. I am telling. I found Dad's letters, Lyra interrupted. The ones you hid from Saren, where he begged to see her, sent her money, tried to help her through college. You kept them all. Mother went pale. Her lawyer started to speak, but she waved him silent. You were too young, she said to me. Too easily influenced by his simple values. I had to protect you. From what? I demanded. From knowing I was loved? From having choices? From being weak? She stood up, her carefully constructed poise shattering. From ending up like him, content with mediocrity, with just enough, with being nothing. Dad isn't nothing, Lyra said quietly. He's everything you're not. Honest. Caring. Real. Mother's face contorted. I won't let you ruin everything I've built. Either you help us, Saren, or I'll tell them about the documents you signed when you were 17. The ones that implicate you in Calvin's earliest schemes. Agent Chin stepped forward. Actually, Mrs. Hargrove, we have those documents. And the proof that you forged your daughter's signature. Mother's lawyer paled. What? Calvin kept records, I said. Of everything. Dad found them in your old house last week. He's been working with the FBI since then. You're bluffing, Mother whispered, but her hands were shaking. No more deals, Agent Chin said. No more manipulation. It's over. Mother looked between us, her daughters now standing together. For the first time in my life, I saw real fear in her eyes. I did love you, she said softly. Both of you. In my way. I know, I replied. That's what makes it so sad. As they let her out, Lyra grabbed my hand. What happens now? I watched Mother's straight back disappear down the hallway, still trying to maintain her dignity. The weight of years of pain and anger began to lift, replaced by something lighter. Not forgiveness, exactly. But freedom. Now we build something new, I said. Something real. Through the window, I could see Dad waiting in the courthouse garden. Simple. Honest. Real. Everything I wanted to be. Everything I finally could be. 6 months later, I stood in Dad's backyard, watching Lyra arrange flowers on the reception tables. My wedding was tomorrow, and somehow everything felt different than I'd imagined. Better, mostly. Stranger, sometimes. The prosecutor called, Adrian said, joining me with 2 cups of coffee. Your mother's sentencing is next week. I nodded, watching Lyra laugh with Dad as he helped her with a particularly stubborn centerpiece. She'd moved in with him 3 months ago, started community college, got a part-time job at a local cafe. The transformation was remarkable. Are you going? Adrian asked quietly. I don't know. I sipped my coffee, remembering the letter Mother had sent last month. Not asking for anything for once. Just acknowledging everything. The pain she'd caused, the choices she'd made, the damage she'd done. It felt real, finally. But maybe that was just another manipulation. Whatever you decide, Adrian said. I'm with you. The screen door creaked, and Dad emerged with a stack of old photo albums. Look what I found in the attic. We gathered around the patio table, flipping through pages of forgotten memories. There I was at 10, gangly and serious, building elaborate structures with Dad's wooden blocks. Another showed Lyra and me at her 5th birthday party, before the divide between us grew too wide. I remember this. Lyra said softly, touching a photo of all of us at the beach. It was right before. Everything changed. Before Calvin. Before Mother's obsession with status consumed her. Before money and appearances became more important than love. You were both such happy kids, Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. I should have fought harder. No. I squeezed his hand. You fought exactly right. You stayed constant. Reliable. Real. The afternoon light turned golden, casting long shadows across the yard. Tomorrow, this space would be filled with guests, friends, colleagues, chosen family. Mother's absence would be noticed, commented on, but not mourned. Not really. Oh! Lyra jumped up. I almost forgot. She ran inside, returning with an envelope. This came to Mom's old house. The realtor forwarded it. I recognized Calvin's handwriting immediately. The postmark was from somewhere in South America. Should I open it? I asked no one in particular. It's your choice, Adrian said. Like everything else now. I turned the envelope over in my hands, feeling its weight. More explanations? More manipulations? More attempts to rewrite history? Instead of opening it, I handed it to Lyra. You decide. Whatever's in there affects you too. She studied it for a moment, then walked to Dad's old charcoal grill. Without hesitation, she dropped the envelope onto the cooling embers. We watched it curl and blacken, taking its secrets with it. Some answers, she said, aren't worth the price they cost. Dad started gathering the photo albums. Speaking of cost, I have something for you both. He disappeared inside, returning with 2 envelopes. I've been saving. For both my daughters. Lyra's eyes filled with tears at the word daughters. Inside each envelope was a check, modest by Mother's standards, but representing years of careful saving. Dad, no. I started, but he held up his hand. Let me do this. Not to make up for the past, but to invest in your futures. Both of you. As the sun set, we sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by wedding preparations and old photographs. The burned letters' ashes scattered on the wind. My phone buzzed, a text from Agent Chin. Your mother asked about the wedding. Said to tell you she understands. I didn't respond. Some wounds heal clean, others leave scars, and some just need to be left alone to find their own way of mending. Ready for tomorrow? Adrian asked softly. I looked around, at my supportive father, my transformed sister, my loving fiancé. At the life we were building, not perfect but real. Not what I'd imagined as a child, but somehow exactly what I needed. Yeah, I said. I think I finally am.
My name is Ellie, and if you told me 3 years ago that I'd be in this mess, I'd have laughed. 3 years, that's all it took for my life to turn from a romantic comedy into some daytime soap opera. It started with Jake, my husband, or as I now like to call him, the man-child I married. We met at a friend's barbecue, and he was the life of the party. Always smiling, always easygoing, or so I thought. The wedding was a dream, but dreams end, and reality hits hard. I remember the first time I asked him to cook something, and he looked at me like I'd asked him to solve a math equation. Ellie, babe, you know I can't cook, he said, with that sheepish grin that I mistook for charm. But Jake, you've got to learn. I can't cook every night, I replied, trying to keep my cool. I can barely make toast, Ellie. Why change now? He shrugged, and that was that. And so it went. I'd come home from work, tired from the day, hoping for a moment to relax. But instead, I'd find Jake, on the couch, controller in hand, waiting for me to serve dinner like some 1950s housewife. I worked my way up in the company, aiming for that promotion. It was hard, but I thought at least I had Jake's support. When I found out I was pregnant, I was over the moon and terrified. I thought maybe this would make Jake step up, but even that was like hoping for a snowstorm in July. We had Ava, our little bundle of joy and love. She was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thought to us. But Jake, well, he thought differently. You know, you make more money than me. It makes sense for you to go back to work, he said one evening as we sat exhausted on the couch, Ava finally asleep. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized I was the only adult in the house. Jake, being a stay-at-home dad means actually doing things at home, you know? He just nodded, eyes already drifting back to his game. Yeah, I got it. But he didn't got it. Not really. His mom, bless her, would come over to help, actually to do his job. She was a saint, loved Ava to bits, loved me too, in her own way. She'd shake her head at Jake, whispering, "You got your father's brains, but none of his sense." Then, like some cruel twist of fate, Jake's parents passed away. Within a month of each other, like they couldn't live without the other. I was heartbroken. They were the parents I never had. Jake, though, he just saw dollar signs. The day he told me he wanted a divorce, it was like any other Tuesday. I was chopping vegetables for dinner, Ava was drawing at the kitchen table, and Jake strolled in like he owned the place. "I want a divorce, Ellie," he said, not a hint of emotion in his voice. I stopped chopping. "What?" "I'm getting the inheritance, the house. I don't need this. Any of this." He gestured around, at the home we built, at our life. "You mean you don't need us?" I said, my voice low, trying to keep it together for Ava's sake. "Yeah, something like that," he shrugged. And just like that, the illusion shattered. There was no happily ever after waiting for me. Just a grown man walking out the door, leaving his wife and daughter behind, chasing after the ghost of money yet touched. That was the beginning of the end. Or maybe it was a new beginning, just not the one I expected. The night Jake left, I sat on the edge of Ava's bed, watching her sleep. My mind raced with what I needed to do next. The thought of divorce had danced around my head before, but now it was a music blaring full volume. I had wanted to do it, to break free from the man who couldn't even fry an egg, but then Ava came along, and she changed everything. I remember the morning after he left. I was sipping my coffee, the silence of the apartment pressing down on me. Ava was at my feet, playing with her blocks, oblivious to the storm in her mother's heart. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" she asked, looking up at me with those big, curious eyes. "He's gone to stay somewhere else for a while," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Why?" she pressed, in that innocent way kids do when they sense a deeper story. "Sometimes people need a little time apart," I said, hoping she'd let it go. "Will he come back?" Her voice was small, worried. I sighed. "I don't know, sweetheart, I don't know." That day at work was a blur. I was there physically, but my mind was a million miles away. When I finally got home, the loneliness of the empty apartment was a slap in the face. I had to do something, anything. I called my sister, Laura, the one who always seemed to have her life together. "Laura, it's Ellie. Jake left," I blurted out as soon as she picked up. "Ellie, what happened?" Laura's voice was a mix of concern and, "I told you so." "He wants a divorce," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. There was a pause and then, "Are you okay?" "No, not really, but I will be. I have to be for Ava," I replied, finding a strength I didn't know I had. "You're better off without him, Ellie. You know that, right?" Laura's voice was firm now, the big sister coming through. "Yeah, I guess I do." "Good. Now let's talk about what you're going to do next." And we did. We talked about lawyers, about finances, about how I was going to navigate being a single mom. Laura was a rock, and I clung to her advice like a lifeline. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings and paperwork. Divorce is like that. A lot of hurry up and wait, mixed with moments of heartache. I was angry, more than I thought possible, but underneath that anger was a resolve forming. I was going to get through this, not just for me, but for Ava. She deserved a life free from the chaos her father brought. Ava, she was my light in the darkness. Her laughter, her smile, they kept me going when all I wanted to do was curl up and hide from the world. One evening, as I was putting her to bed, she looked at me with those big, wise beyond her years eyes and said, "Mommy, I don't need Daddy. I just need you." And just like that, the edge of decision wasn't so sharp anymore. I knew what I had to do. I was going to fight for a better life, for both of us. It was time to let go of the life I thought I wanted, and embrace the one waiting for us. Just me and Ava, against the world. The divorce papers sat heavy on the kitchen table, like unwanted guests that wouldn't leave. It's funny how a few sheets of paper can turn your world upside down. Ava was at daycare, giving me a few hours of silence to think, or maybe to avoid thinking. The apartment felt empty, echoes of the life we used to have bouncing off the walls. I tried to keep things normal for Ava's sake. But every night, when I'd put her to bed and sit down to face the evening alone, the silence screamed at me. I had to do something with my hands, keep busy, so I started fixing things around the house, stuff that Jake never got around to doing. One Saturday, the sink decided to start leaking, a steady drip that drilled into my brain. I had half a mind to call Jake and demand he come fix it, just out of spite. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself in the hardware store, standing in an aisle of pipes and wrenches, feeling out of my depth. "Need some help?" A voice broke through my confusion. I looked up to see a woman, about my age, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, a name tag that read Maggie. "Yeah, my sink's leaking, and I don't even know where to start," I admitted. Maggie smiled. "Let's start with the basics then. You got a wrench?" Back home, armed with my new tools and a hastily scribbled set of instructions, I tackled the sink. It took me 3 tries and a lot of muttered curses, but I fixed it. There was a small sense of victory standing there, watching the water run smoothly without a single drop escaping. My phone rang, shattering the moment. It was Jake's aunt, Linda. I hesitated before answering. She'd been caught in the middle of all this, wanting to support her nephew, but knowing he was in the wrong. "Ellie, it's Linda. I was just wondering how you and Ava are doing." Her voice was tentative, like she was walking on a tightrope. "We're managing, Linda. How are you holding up?" It's been hard. I miss seeing Ava." The guilt hit me then. Despite everything, Linda loved Ava, and Ava loved her. "Why don't you come over for tea tomorrow? Ava would love to see you." "Really? I'd like that, Ellie. Thank you." It wasn't just the broken sink that got fixed that day. Linda came over the next afternoon, and for a couple of hours, our little apartment felt like a home again. Ava giggled as Linda chased her around, and I realized how much I'd missed the sound of someone else's laughter in our home. Linda and I sat on the couch, watching Ava play, an unspoken truce hanging between us. "You're doing a good job, Ellie," Linda said, breaking the silence. I shrugged. "I'm trying." "No, really. Jake, he's my nephew, but he's not doing right by you or Ava." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the pain in her eyes. She was an aunt, torn between her nephew and her grandchild, and despite everything, she was here, choosing us. Life after Linda's visit settled into a new kind of rhythm. Ava's laughter filled the gaps in our little home, and my days blurred with work and motherhood. I almost forgot about Jake, almost. Then came the call that pulled him back into our lives like a bad rerun of a show you never liked. "Miss Ellie, this is Harold Greer. I'm the executor of your late father-in-law's estate. I'd like to schedule a time for you to come in and discuss the will." The voice on the other end of the phone was formal, detached. A cold knot formed in my stomach. "Of course, Mr. Greer. When do you need me?" "We've scheduled the reading this Thursday at 3 p.m. Will that work for you?" I agreed, though my mind was racing. What could possibly be in that will for me? Jake was the son. Surely he'd be the one to inherit. I shook the thoughts away and focused on getting through the week. Thursday came too fast. I sat in a stiff chair in a lawyer's office that smelled of leather and old books. The room was quiet, too quiet. Jake sat across from me, a smug look on his face. He hadn't even said hello. Mr. Greer cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming. I'll get straight to the point." He read through the legal jargon, and with each word, Jake's smile grew wider. But then, Mr. Greer said something that wiped the grin right off Jake's face. "And to my granddaughter, Ava, I bequeath the majority of my estate, including the family home and associated assets. To my son, Jake, I bequeath the ownership of my apartment on 5th Street, under the condition he maintains employment for a period of no less than 6 months." Jake's mouth dropped open. "What? That's it? The apartment? There's got to be some mistake." "No mistake, Mr. Jake. Your parents were very clear." Mr. Greer's voice was steady, unyielding. "But I'm his son. I'm supposed to get everything." Jake's voice was rising, a temper tantrum brewing. "Your father believed in hard work, Jake. He wanted to encourage you to stand on your own," I found myself saying, surprised at my own calmness. Jake turned on me. "This is your fault, Ellie. You turned them against me." Mr. Greer interjected. "Your parents made these decisions long before your separation, Jake." The room spun with the weight of the revelation. I was to manage a fortune for Ava, a future I could secure for her. And Jake, well, Jake was left with an apartment and a challenge. The days that followed were filled with a relentless barrage of calls and paperwork. Jake was furious, calling at all hours, his voice oscillating between begging and demanding. "Ellie, you have to talk to Greer. You have to get him to change this. It's not fair." Jake's voice was desperate one afternoon, the anger giving way to something that sounded like fear. "Jake, it's done. Your parents made their decision," I said, trying to keep my voice steady while Ava played in the background, blissfully unaware. "But you can do something. You have control over Ava's share, right? We're still married." He was grasping at straws, and we both knew it. "Even if I could, I wouldn't. This is for Ava's future, not for us. Not for you to squander," I replied, the finality in my voice feeling like a nail in the coffin of our relationship. He hung up with a string of words I was glad Ava couldn't understand. Severing ties with Jake was like cutting through a thick, gnarled vine that refused to let go. The divorce proceedings turned sour, with Jake's lawyers trying every trick in the book to get him a piece of Ava's inheritance. But my resolve was ironclad. I was fighting for my daughter now, not just for myself. The day we stood before the judge, Jake looked deflated, a shadow of the brash man who had demanded a divorce with such arrogance. The judge was a stern-faced woman who looked like she didn't suffer fools gladly. "Mr. Jake, it seems to me that you're trying to claim what has been clearly and legally bequeathed to your daughter," she said, after hearing Jake's lawyer out. He tried to argue, "But she's just a child. I'm her father, I should be." The court finds no reason to deviate from the will as it stands. The petition is denied. The judge cut him off, her gavel hitting the block with a thud that echoed in the silent courtroom. The dust had barely settled from the courtroom when the full weight of the will's revelation began to sink in. I was now not only the sole caretaker of Ava, but also the steward of her future. It was a daunting reality, a heavy mantle that I carried out of the courthouse that day. I sat down at our modest kitchen table, the sunlight filtering in and landing on the stacks of legal documents that spelled out Ava's inheritance. I shuffled through them, the words trust and estate leaping out at me. They felt alien, too grand for our simple life. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize flashing on the screen. I answered tentatively. "Miss Ellie? This is Janet from First Community Bank. We need to schedule an appointment to set up the trust for Ava." "Right, of course. When would be a good time?" I replied, feeling out of my depth. "How's Monday at 10 a.m.? We can go over everything and make sure you're comfortable with the process." Janet's voice was kind, reassuring. "Monday at 10 it is," I confirmed, a small part of me still in disbelief. Monday's meeting was a marathon of signatures and notaries, of terms like fiduciary and beneficiary. Janet was patient, walking me through each step. "You're doing a great thing for your daughter, Miss Ellie. This will secure her future," she said as we wrapped up. I smiled, a mix of pride and nervousness bubbling within. I just want to do what's best for her. That evening, as I watched Ava play, her innocence and joy untouched by the complexities of adult life, my phone rang again. It was Jake. "Ellie, can we talk?" His voice was subdued, almost unrecognizable. "Jake, I'm really busy with Ava right now. Can it wait?" I replied, not ready to let him disturb our peace. "It's about the inheritance and the apartment. I need some advice," he admitted, and I could hear the struggle in his words. I hesitated, then sighed. "Okay, Jake, what's going on?" "I'm thinking of selling the apartment. I don't know what to do," he said, and I could picture him running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Jake, that might not be a bad idea, but make sure you get some good advice on how to manage the money. Maybe put some aside for Ava, for the future." There was silence on the line for a moment. I hadn't thought of that. Thanks, Ellie. The calm before the storm. That's what life felt like in the weeks following the establishment of Ava's trust. The small oasis of peace was shattered one Tuesday morning when a process server showed up at my door with papers that screamed legal turmoil. I thumbed through the documents, each page a punch to the gut. Jake was contesting the will again, claiming that as Ava's father, he deserved a portion of the inheritance to ensure her well-being, in his hands. My hands shook with a cocktail of anger and fear as I dialed my lawyer's number. "Michael, it's Ellie. He's doing it again. He's suing for a part of Ava's inheritance," I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. Michael's voice was a steady force. "Ellie, we knew he might pull something like this. We're ready. We'll fight this, and we'll win, just like last time." I took a deep breath, trying to absorb some of his confidence. "What's our next step?" "We meet, we plan, and we protect what Ava's grandparents wanted for her," he replied. The legal wrangling felt like a twisted game, one where Jake played the victim, pushed into a corner by life's unfairness. But this wasn't a game. This was my daughter's future. In court, Jake's lawyer painted a picture of a father sidelined from his daughter's life, cut off from the means to care for her. "Your Honor, my client merely seeks to provide for his daughter in a manner befitting the legacy left by her grandparents," the lawyer said, gesturing towards Jake with practiced sympathy. The judge turned to me. "Miss Ellie, do you wish to respond?" I stood, my legs firm despite the butterflies. "Your Honor, everything that has been done is in the best interest of my daughter, as outlined by her grandparents. Their wishes were clear, and I intend to honor them." The judge nodded, her gaze flicking between me and Jake. "I will review the case and render my decision. We're adjourned." Days later, the decision came down. The will would stand as it was. Jake's claims were dismissed. I called Linda to tell her the news, her voice weary when she answered. "We won, Linda." "The judge sided with us again," I said. There was a pause, a heavy sigh. "I'm glad, Ellie. It's what my brother wanted, for Ava to be taken care of." I hung up the phone and watched Ava, her brow furrowed in concentration as she colored. This little girl, unaware of the battles being fought in her name, was the reason I'd weather the storms. And as the legal clouds cleared, I promised myself that I'd build a life for her so full of love and stability that no amount of turmoil could shake her foundation. Months had passed since the court upheld the will, and life had settled into a new, more peaceful pattern. The legal turmoil was behind us, and ahead lay the open road of new beginnings. I was sitting on the porch, the evening sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, when Ava came bouncing out, her hair in pigtails and a grin on her face. "Mommy, look what I drew at school today," she exclaimed, thrusting a piece of paper into my hands. It was a drawing of the two of us, holding hands under a big, bright sun. "It's beautiful, Ava," I said, my heart swelling with love for this little person who had been my rock through the storm. "Miss Ellie, there's a call for you," called Mrs. Parker, our neighbor who had become a friend and sometimes babysitter. I walked inside, curious. "This is Ellie." "Miss Ellie, it's Janet from the bank. I wanted to let you know that the trust for Ava has been set up successfully, and we've made the first investment for her future education." A wave of relief washed over me. "Thank you, Janet. That's wonderful news." I hung up and went back outside to join Ava, who was now chasing fireflies as they began to light up the twilight. "Mommy, do you think Daddy will come to my birthday party?" Ava's question came out of nowhere, her voice hopeful yet uncertain. I paused, considering my words. "I don't know, honey, but we'll have a great party with or without him. The most important thing is that we're together." Ava nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer, and went back to her game. Later that evening, after Ava had fallen asleep, I sat down with a cup of tea and the last of the day's mail. There was a letter from Jake. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a short note. "Ellie, I've been doing some thinking. I'm sorry for everything. I'm getting help, trying to get better. I won't bother you for money again. I hope I can be the father Ava deserves one day. Jake." I set the letter down, a complex mix of emotions churning inside me. Anger, relief, hope, each battling for prominence. I realized that Jake's journey was his own, and while I hoped he'd find his way for Ava's sake, My focus was on the life I was building for us. The next morning, Ava and I planted flowers in the garden, her laughter filling the air, mixing with the sound of the birds and the rustle of the leaves. It was a simple moment, but it was ours, and it was filled with the promise of a new day. As we patted down the last of the soil, I looked at our home, the garden, and my daughter, and I knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, but there would also be joy, growth, and love, the kind that survives even the darkest storms. "Mommy, will the flowers grow big?" Ava asked, looking up at me with wide, hopeful eyes. "Yes, Ava, with a little care and time, they'll grow big and strong, just like you," I said, taking her hand in mine. All right, where to start? I guess I'll just dive right in. I'm Ellie, your typical 26-year-old with a job that keeps me on my toes and a love life that's actually, surprisingly, the best part of my day. That's all thanks to Jack, my fiancé. He popped the question 3 months ago, and I still get giddy thinking about it. We've set the date, and the wedding's supposed to be this big, beautiful bash in 3 months. But man, planning a wedding is like having another full-time job. So there's me, excited and stressed in equal parts. Then there's Jack, the man of the hour, who's just as swamped at his job as I am at mine. We're the dynamic duo, trying to juggle spreadsheets and seating charts, conference calls, and cake tastings. One evening, after a particularly long day, Jack and I were slumped on our couch, our living room littered with brochures and to-do lists. "Ellie," Jack said, rubbing his eyes, "how are we going to manage all this?" I shrugged, feeling the weight of exhaustion. "I don't know, Jack. Maybe we should just elope." Jack chuckled. "Tempting, but you know you want the big family shindig." He wasn't wrong. I did want the big do. Family, friends, the whole 9 yards. But at that moment, it felt like climbing a mountain without any gear. The next day, Dad called. He's been my rock since Mom passed away when I was 6. And since then, it's been him and me, until Vivian, my stepmom, came into the picture. I'd like to say we were the picture-perfect family, but that'd be a stretch. "Ellie, how's the wedding prep going?" Dad's voice was full of that fatherly concern that meant he was about to offer advice I probably didn't want. I sighed into the phone. "It's going, Dad. Slow, but going." There was a pause, and I knew something was up. "Listen, sweetheart, I've been thinking. Vivian could help you out. She's got a knack for organizing events and such." I paused, a little taken aback. Vivian and I had a civil but cold relationship. The idea of her helping with the most important day of my life was unsettling. I'm not sure that's a great idea, Dad," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. But before I could add anything else, Vivian's voice was suddenly on the line. "Ellie, darling, I overheard. I'd love to help with the wedding. It'll be fabulous, you'll see." Her voice was sweet, too sweet, like syrup over poison ivy. But Dad was giving me a give her a chance look through the phone. I could feel it. "Thanks, Vivian. That's really generous," I said, with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Jack, who'd overheard the conversation, gave me a raised eyebrow. "Are you sure about this?" he mouthed. I shook my head, mouthing back, "Nope, but what choice do I have?" So that was that. Vivian was on board as our wedding planner. Jack squeezed my hand, a silent show of support. I squeezed back, hoping I wasn't just handing over the keys to a bulldozer ready to take down my dream day. But hey, that's the risk you take when you're trying to pull off the biggest party of your life, with a 9 to 5 that's more like a 5 to 9. Fingers crossed, right? Vivian entered the picture when I was just 6, a little while after Mom died. Dad was grieving and, I guess, lonely. So when Vivian came along with her big smiles and bigger promises, he fell for it. I wanted to be happy for him, really, I did. But there was something about Vivian that set off my 6-year-old alarm bells. I remember the day she moved in. I was playing with my dolls in what used to be Mom's garden, and she came out, all dolled up and looking at me like I was a spot on her perfect dress. "Ellie, darling, why don't you play inside? You're getting all dirty out here," she said in that voice that pretended to care, but didn't really. I just stared at her, clutching my doll tighter. Mom liked it when I played here. She said the flowers needed my laughter. Vivian had this little twitch of a frown before plastering on a smile. Well, I'm sure your mom also liked you clean and tidy. Come on, let's find you something less messy to do. It didn't get better from there. Not long after, Lara was born. And don't get me wrong, I love my little sister more than anything. But with Lara's arrival, I became more of a nuisance than a daughter to Vivian. I sat on my far-off room bed, the one that had been pushed aside to make space for Lara's nursery. Dad knocked and came in, sitting beside me with a worried look. "Ellie, you haven't been spending much time with Vivian and Lara," Dad said gently. "Don't you want to get to know your sister?" I nodded, fiddling with the edge of my bedspread. "I do, Dad. It's just... Vivian doesn't really want me around." Dad's brow creased. "What makes you say that?" It was hard to put into words. The way Vivian's presence made the air heavier, made the house less of a home. "She's always telling me to go play somewhere else, to stay quiet, to not bother you or Lara." Dad hugged me then, tight. "Ellie, Vivian just wants what's best for all of us. Give her some time. You'll see." But time didn't change much. As we grew up, Lara got everything shiny and new, while I got her hand-me-downs and gently used stuff from secondhand stores. One day I finally asked Vivian about it. "Vivian, why does Lara get new clothes and I don't?" I was older then, more aware of the discrepancies. She looked down at me, her eyes cool and detached. "Ellie, I just think it's important for you to learn to be grateful for what you have. Lara is... well, she's younger. She needs to feel special." "But I want to feel special too," I murmured, more to myself than to her. Vivian didn't respond to that, just turned away with that air of finality that ended all discussions. I learned then that some battles just weren't worth fighting. Not then, at least. So, when Dad suggested Vivian help with the wedding, all those years of being second best, of feeling like an outsider in my own home, they all bubbled up. But Dad was looking at me with hopeful eyes, and I just couldn't say no. Not to him. "All right, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's see what Vivian can do." Planning a wedding is tough, right? Try doing it with someone who's got their own idea of what your big day should look like. Vivian was like a whirlwind, swooping in with her planners and swatches, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We sat at the kitchen table one afternoon, surrounded by what looked like a stationery store's exploded inventory. Vivian was flipping through a binder that had more tabs than my browser after a night of online shopping. "So, Ellie," she began, not looking up from her binder, "I was thinking we should go with a winter wonderland theme. White, ice blue, a hint of silver. Elegant, sophisticated." I bit my lip. Actually, Jack and I were hoping for something more colorful. Warm colors, you know? It's a celebration, not a gala. Vivian finally looked up, her smile tight. "Darling, trust me. The winter theme is very in vogue right now. It'll be beautiful." I tried to push back a little. "But it's our wedding, not a trend show. We want it to feel personal." She sighed, as if I were a child who didn't understand the concept of money. "Fine, give me your ideas, and I'll see what I can do to make them tasteful." Ouch. That stung. But I pressed on, outlining the vision Jack and I had. Lots of greens, deep reds, like an enchanted forest. I even had a Pinterest board ready to show her. Vivian scrolled through my phone, her face unreadable. "Charming," she said flatly. "I'll take it into consideration." That was Vivian speak for, "I'll do what I want." I should have known then that things weren't going to go smoothly. Jack seemed to sense it too when I told him about our discussion. He frowned, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. "You sure you want to go through with this? We can still do it ourselves, or get a professional." I shook my head. "Dad's already stressed with work, and I don't want to pile on. Plus, how bad can it be?" Famous last words, right? The next few weeks were a blur of work and wedding chaos. Vivian would call me at random times, rattling off decisions she'd made. "Ellie, I've booked the church and the reception hall, and I found the perfect caterer. Who needs a tasting, right? Oh, and I took the liberty of choosing your dress. You'll love it." I'd blink, trying to process her words while my boss waved at me to join a meeting. Thanks, Vivian, but shouldn't I try on the dress first? There's no time, she'd insist. It's all under control. But it didn't feel under control. It felt like I was being steamrolled by a smile and a clipboard. The crunch came with the guest list. Jack and I had spent nights agonizing over it, making sure no one was left out. I handed the list to Vivian on a Sunday, our only day off together. Here's the final list. It's got everyone on it. Vivian glanced at it and tutted. This is far too many people, Ellie. We'll have to cut it down. Quality over quantity. My heart sank. But these are our friends and family. We can't just not invite them. Vivian patted my hand, her rings cold against my skin. Leave it to me. I'll handle it. I should have grabbed that list and run. I should have said something, done something. But I was tired, and a part of me, maybe the part that still wanted to believe in good old stepmom magic, thought it might be okay. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, the kind of day you'd order out of a catalog. I woke up with those pre-wedding jitters, you know? Butterflies doing a tap dance in my stomach. Jack sent me a text that just said, "Today's the day we've been waiting for. I love you." That should have been enough to calm the storm inside me. I should have been greeted by a room bustling with bridesmaids and the usual pre-wedding chaos. But instead, I found myself staring into the mirror in a quiet room, alone. Lara was supposed to be here by now, and my friends. Where was everyone? My phone buzzed, and it was Lara, sounding like she was on the verge of tears. "Ellie, I'm so sorry. I'm running late. The hairdresser had a mix-up with the time, and now they're rushing to get us all done." I took a deep breath. "It's okay, Lara. Just get here when you can, okay?" "Of course, Ellie. I wouldn't miss this for the world," Lara said, her voice firm with sisterly resolve. I put the phone down and tried to focus on getting ready. The dress was beautiful, even if I hadn't picked it out. Vivian had taste, I'd give her that. But it was the silence that got to me. The lack of laughter, the missing chit-chat. It didn't feel like a wedding morning. It felt like any other day, except I was putting on a really fancy dress. By the time I got to the church, my heart was racing, not from excitement, but from a creeping sense of dread. Jack's reassuring smile from across the aisle was the only thing that kept me from bolting. The church should have been packed. Instead, there were gaps in the pews like missing teeth. Whispers echoed off the high ceilings, filling the spaces where our friends and family should have been. Vivian was flitting about, pretending to adjust flowers that didn't need adjusting. I cornered her just before the music started. "Vivian, where is everyone?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. She gave me that plastic smile, the one that never quite made it to her eyes. "Oh, darling, I'm afraid there must have been some sort of postal error. A lot of invitations got returned. So unfortunate." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Postal error? How does that even happen nowadays? Did you even send them out?" Vivian looked around, then leaned in close. "These things happen, Ellie. It's out of our hands. Let's not make a scene. It's your day to shine." But shine for whom? The empty seats? The quiet where there should have been joy? I stood there, the organ music starting up, and I realized this was it. The day I dreamed of was starting to look like a nightmare. Jack's eyes met mine from across the church, a silent question in their depths. I squared my shoulders. No way was I letting Vivian's mistakes, or sabotage, a nasty little voice whispered, ruin the day I'd marry the man I loved. When we got to the reception, my heart sank even lower. The place looked like someone's idea of a bad joke. The colors, the decorations, it was all wrong. It was like walking into a different couple's wedding. Where were the rich colors, the warm ambience we wanted? Jack squeezed my hand as we stood at the entrance, taking it all in. "Hey, it's unique," he said, trying to find a silver lining. But his eyes couldn't hide his disappointment. I tried to laugh it off. Unique is one word for it. We found Vivian, who was directing the staff with more enthusiasm than a game show host. "Vivian!" I called out, marching over. "What happened here? This isn't what we talked about." Vivian turned, her eyebrows raising in mock surprise. Oh, Ellie, you're here! Well, I just thought this would be so much more exquisite. It's very chic, don't you think? Chic? I echoed, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. We wanted warm and welcoming, not this ice palace. Some of the guests turned to look, their expressions a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Vivian's eyes darted to them, and her tone shifted to a soothing whisper. Let's not get upset, darling. Today is about you and Jack. Let's not spoil it with decor disagreements. I felt Jack's hand on my back, a gentle reminder. He leaned in and whispered, let's just get through this, for us. So we did. We put on our best smiles, greeted the few guests, and tried to make the best of it. Then came the moment for the cake cutting. Only there was no cake. Just an empty table with a knife lying there like a lone soldier after a battle. Vivian, I said slowly, feeling numb. Where's the cake? She blinked, then clapped a hand to her mouth. Oh, the cake! I knew I forgot something. Silly me, I must have missed that detail. Jack's aunt, who'd had more than her fair share of the bubbly, piped up from a nearby table. No cake? At a wedding? Now I've seen everything. The room erupted into whispers and murmurs. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I wasn't going to give Vivian the satisfaction of seeing me cry. It was Laura, bless her, who saved the day. She slipped out quietly, and before we knew it, she was back with an armful of boxes. We'll have cake, she declared, setting the boxes on the table and starting to arrange the assorted pastries with a flourish. Let's call it a dessert buffet, shall we? The guests applauded, some out of support, others probably because it was the most entertainment they'd had all day. The reception was teetering on the edge of disaster, but Laura's quick thinking with the cakes from the pastry shop had given it a heartbeat again. Watching her rush back in with those boxes, I felt a mix of gratitude and something like pride. She was the little sister who'd watched and learned from all the nonsense Vivian put me through, always ready to jump in. Where did you find these? I asked, peeking into the boxes filled with eclairs, tarts, and cupcakes. Laura was all action, arranging them with a flourish. There's a little shop down the street. I just told them it was for my sister's wedding, and they packed up everything sweet they had. I hugged her, maybe a little too tightly. You're amazing, you know that? She grinned, wiping her hands on her apron. I do now. Go on. Enjoy your party. I've got this. And she did. Guests started milling around the table, picking out their desserts. There was laughter and chatter, the warm sounds of a wedding reception that had been missing before. Jack leaned over to me, a chocolate cupcake in hand. Your sister's something else, he said with a chuckle. Yeah, she is, I agreed, the tension in my shoulders easing just a bit. The party started to feel like a party, even if it was nothing like we planned. People were smiling, dancing, and the room was filled with the clinking of glasses and the soft buzz of conversation. As Jack and I mingled with our guests, thanking them for coming, my dad pulled me aside. He looked stern, the way he did when he meant business. Ellie, your stepmom. She's been acting odd all day. Are you sure everything's okay? I sighed. I don't know, Dad. It's like everything's gone wrong on purpose. He put an arm around me. We'll talk about this later, okay? For now, just focus on Jack and the good parts of today. I nodded, knowing he was right. But as the evening wound down, I caught snatches of a conversation that made my blood run cold. Vivian was on the phone, tucked away in a corner. I only heard a bit of it, but it was enough. Couldn't stand the thought of her happy day. Yes, I did it. And I'd do it again. Yes, that's exactly what I suspected, but still these words were like a punch in the gut. I hurried to tell Dad about the overheard conversation. The night could have been a total wash, but it turned out pretty okay in the end. And as Jack and I swayed to the music, his forehead pressed against mine, I realized that this was all I needed. The love of my life, my loyal sister, and a room full of second-choice desserts that somehow tasted better than any wedding cake ever could. After the half-hearted toasts and the uneasy laughter had died down, my father cornered Vivian near the coat room. I could tell by the tightness in his jaw and the stiff set of his shoulders that the truth I feared was finally coming to light. Vivian, what the hell happened today? Dad's voice was a low rumble of contained fury. Ellie told me what you said. You deliberately ruined her wedding? Vivian's face twisted into something ugly, a snarl that I had never seen before. Yes, I did. I've always hated her. She's nothing but a reminder of what was here before me. Her perfect life, her perfect wedding. It's more than I could stand. I felt like I'd been slapped. The venom in her voice was almost palpable. My father, though, he turned an alarming shade of red. Hated my daughter? My daughter? His voice rose, and people nearby started to turn and look. You're her stepmother. You promised to take care of her as your own. Vivian scoffed, and her laughter was a bitter sound. Take care of her? I've had to live in her shadow, Tom. Every single day. Well, not anymore. I won't let her have a perfect day if it's the last thing I do. That's it, Dad said, his voice now shaking with anger. I'm done. Our marriage is over, Vivian. The crowd had hushed, all eyes on the unfolding drama. Vivian seemed to deflate, her momentary outburst of rage giving way to panic. Tom, please! I didn't mean… You didn't mean it? Dad's voice boomed now, echoing off the walls. You've ruined what's supposed to be the happiest day of our daughter's life. Get out! Get out of my sight! Dad's hands were trembling as he pointed toward the door. Vivian looked around, her eyes wild, seeking an ally and finding none. With nowhere left to turn, she stumbled toward the exit, her exit as dramatic as the mess she'd left behind. I felt numb, watching the woman who'd been a constant, though often cold, presence in my life being exiled by the man who had loved her. My father turned to me, his eyes softening. Ellie, I'm so sorry. I had no idea, he stammered, reaching for me. It's okay, Dad, I said, the shock giving way to an odd sense of relief. It's over now. The last of the guests had trickled away, leaving the venue in a hushed stillness that felt like the calm after a storm. Dad was off somewhere, probably dealing with the fallout of Vivian's exit, while I found myself sitting at an empty table, my wedding dress a crumpled mess of white around me. You okay? It was my sister Lara, her young face lined with worry that seemed too heavy for her years. I managed a weary smile. Yeah, I think I will be. She sat next to me, her hand finding mine. I'm sorry, Ellie, for everything Mom did. I shook my head. Not your fault, never was. There was a pause, the kind that's full of words that people are too scared to say out loud. It was Lara who finally broke it. Dad's really mad, isn't he? Yeah, I haven't seen him like that, ever. Lara bit her lip. What's going to happen now? I sighed. Divorce, I guess. It's not just about what happened today. It's been a long time coming. She nodded, understanding more than a kid her age should. And us? I squeezed her hand, a promise in my grip. We're sisters. That's not going to change. We'll stick together, okay? Okay, Lara said, a small smile breaking through. You and Jack gonna try for another wedding? I chuckled, the sound strange and distant to my own ears. I think we've had enough excitement for a while. Maybe we'll just elope. Elope? Lara's eyebrows went up. That sounds kind of fun. It does, doesn't it? The idea was growing on me. The possibility of a celebration without drama. Just Jack and me. Dad's coming, Lara said suddenly, and I looked up to see him approaching, his face worn but his eyes clear. Ellie, he said, his voice gentle. I'm so sorry. If there's anything… I stood up and hugged him, cutting off his apology. It's not your fault, Dad. We'll get through this. We stood there, the three of us in an embrace that felt like it could hold up the world if it needed to. It was the end of a wedding, sure, but it felt more like a beginning, the start of something new and hopeful. Let's go home, I said, and as we walked out together, I thought that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind us. You know that feeling when you're sure the universe has got your back? That was me, Emily, living in what I thought was a rom-com level romance. Tom, my soon-to-be hubby, was the kind of guy who'd walk the dog at 5 a.m. just so I could sleep in. We clicked, you know? So there we were, me and Tom, at Luigi's, our go-to spot for date night. Twinkly lights, check. Garlic in the air, check. just a regular Tuesday, or so I thought. Tom, you seriously need to stop making me laugh. I'm going to spit out my wine, I teased, as he was recounting his latest office mishap. He just grinned. That's the plan, Em. If you make a scene, maybe we'll get a free dessert out of it. We were in our little bubble until, out of nowhere, Tommy! Emily! What a small world! Linda, in all her floral dress glory, stood there, beaming as if she'd won the lottery. Tom nearly choked on his ravioli, and I felt my smile freeze. Oh, Linda, what are you doing here? I said, trying to keep it friendly while signaling the SOS to Tom with my eyes. I was just passing by and thought I'd pop in for a bite. Mind if I join you two lovebirds? She already had her purse off her shoulder, ready to sit. Tom recovered, coughing a bit. Well, it's our date night, you know. Linda waved a hand, dismissing the notion like a fly. Oh, pish-posh, I'll just sit for a minute. I've missed seeing you two. Before we knew it, she was pulling up a chair, and the waiter was setting a third place. There went our romantic evening. So, Emily, dear, how's the wedding planning? I hope you're considering the peonies for the centerpieces. They really are the best choice. I exchanged a glance with Tom, taking a deep breath. Actually, Linda, we were thinking of going with lilies. They're my favorite. Linda made a face, as if I'd suggested decorating with weeds. Lilies are so common, Emily, but it's your day, I suppose. Anyways, Tommy, did you tell her about the idea I had for the honeymoon? An Alaskan cruise would be unforgettable. I could tell Tom was trying to figure out how to steer his mom away from hijacking our wedding, and now our honeymoon. Mom, we were kind of set on the beach getaway, remember? Linda pursed her lips, but then her eyes lit up with that, I have the perfect solution glow. Well, you could always do both. I saw this great 2-for-1 deal. That's when I knew we were in for a ride with Linda. She was like a living, breathing wedding planner and life coach we never signed up for. But hey, at least we got that free dessert. The waiter felt sorry for us, I guess. Wedding prep is like juggling cats, let me tell you. And if your fiancé's mom is Linda, it's like the cats are on fire. I'm up to my neck in fabric swatches and catering menus, and then there's Linda with her giant binder labeled Tommy's Wedding, which was weird because last time I checked, I was the one marrying him. One evening, Tom and I were sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by guest lists and table settings, when Linda burst in like we were on some home makeover show. Emily, darling, I've got it all figured out, Linda announced, dropping her binder with a thud on the coffee table. I glanced over at Tom, who gave me an I'm so sorry look. Oh? Figured what out, Linda? I said, trying to sound curious instead of wanting to bolt for the nearest exit. The seating chart. You won't believe it, but I've managed to seat everyone according to astrological signs. It's going to be so unique, Linda beamed, clearly pleased with herself. Tom sighed, running his hands through his hair. Mom, that's creative, but Emily and I already worked on the seating chart together. Linda's smile faltered. But I just thought. I jumped in before this could turn into a guilt trip. We really appreciate the help, Linda, but we've got this covered. Right, Tom? Tom nodded, giving my hand a little squeeze under the table. Yeah, Mom. Emily's got some great ideas, and we're pretty happy with them. Linda wasn't used to resistance. She huffed a little, flipping through her binder as if it held the secret to world peace. Fine, but what about the invites? Please tell me you're not still considering that dreadful calligraphy. It's practically unreadable. Tom looked at me, and I could tell this was his breaking point. Actually, we both like the calligraphy. It's happening. I swear, Linda's eyes could have started a small kitchen fire. But then, as if a switch flipped, she was all sunshine and rainbows again. Well, it's your day. She was definitely not happy, but she was trying. The next hurdle was Grandma Ruth. Sweet lady, loves crosswords, makes a mean pot roast. Linda, though, wanted her off the list. She'll just cause drama, Emily. It's better for everyone. That's where Tom drew the line. No, Mom. Grandma Ruth is coming. She's my grandma, and that's not up for discussion. Linda's lips were a straight line. Tommy, I thought you wanted a peaceful, perfect wedding. I do, Mom, with Emily and with Grandma Ruth there. End of story. The battle lines were drawn, but we stood our ground. Linda backed down on that one, but I could tell this was just round one. Only about 100 more rounds to go before the big day. Choosing a wedding dress is supposed to be one of those magical moments for a bride. It was for me, right up until Linda, my future mother-in-law, turned it into a battlefield of beads and lace. I'd fallen in love with a simple, elegant dress, but Linda insisted on something that looked like it should be in a royal wedding, if that wedding was in 1985. It took every ounce of patience and a little backup from my friends to diplomatically decline Linda's generous suggestion. "You really should try something with a little more sparkle," Linda insisted as she pushed a monstrosity covered in sequins towards me. "But I like this one." I tried to keep my voice steady, holding the dress Jenny had found for me. "It feels right." Linda huffed, her lips pursed in a thin line. "Fine, but don't come crying to me when you look back at your wedding photos and realize you look like every other bride out there." The hairstyles weren't any easier. My idea of a loose flowing style was apparently too casual for Linda, who seemed to have a hairstyle playbook that exclusively featured updos capable of picking up satellite signals. "This one will make a statement," Linda declared as the stylist piled my hair higher. I caught the stylist's eye in the mirror, and she mouthed a silent apology. I could tell she was used to this dance. "Linda, I really appreciate your input," I said, after escaping from the latest architectural wonder on my head. "But I think I'm going to go with the original style I had in mind." Linda's disappointment was palpable, but thankfully she let it go, at least for the moment. The wedding itself was beautiful. Despite Linda's sulking face, I walked down the aisle, feeling lighter than air. She tried to push for last-minute changes, but Tom and I stood united, and everything went off without a hitch. Linda spent most of the reception throwing side-eyes at Tom's grandmother, who chuckled and teased her at every opportunity. "You look like you're sucking on lemons, Linda. Lighten up, it's a party." Grandma chuckled, clinking her glass with mine. Linda shot her a look that could sour milk. "I just want everything to be perfect," she muttered. Grandma patted her hand with mock sympathy. "Oh, honey, the day is perfect because they're happy. Look at them." And she was right. Tom and I were happy, no matter what Linda thought about the decorations, the food, or the music. It was our day, and not even a sour-faced mother-in-law could change that. The few days after our wedding were eerily quiet. Tom and I were settling into our new life together, unpacking wedding gifts and sending out thank you cards. I should have known this piece was just the eye of the hurricane, because Linda was about to unleash a storm none of us saw coming. It was a lazy Sunday morning when she arrived, unannounced, of course. She had that look on her face, the one that said she had something up her sleeve. "Morning, Linda," I greeted her, trying to keep the wariness out of my voice. "Emily, Tom, I've been thinking," she began, settling onto our sofa without waiting for an invite. "I can't bear the thought of being away from you two for so long, especially with you going off on your honeymoon soon." Tom and I exchanged a glance. "We'll only be gone for 2 weeks, Mom," Tom said, the confusion clear in his voice. "That's just it," Linda continued, clasping her hands together like she was about to deliver great news. "I've decided to join you. It'll be so much fun." The room was so quiet, you could hear the clock ticking. "Join us? On our honeymoon?" My voice was flat, disbelief and annoyance warring for dominance. "Yes!" Linda beamed, oblivious to our shock. "I found this delightful little place right next to where you'll be staying. I'll hardly know I'm there." Tom finally found his voice. "Mom, honeymoons are for couples to be alone, together. You understand that, right?" Linda's face fell, and she turned to me, eyes wide with a guilt-inducing shimmer. "I just thought I could help make it special. You wouldn't even notice me." "Linda," I said, trying to be as firm yet gentle as possible, "a honeymoon is really just meant for the couple. It's about us having time to ourselves." She looked between us, her expression crumbling, and I felt a pang of something like guilt, but I squashed it. This was our time. "Oh, all right," she said after a moment, her voice laced with disappointment. "If that's what you want." I could tell from the way she said it, this wasn't over. Linda had a plan, and this was just the beginning. Tom squeezed my hand, a silent vow that we'd weather whatever storm Linda was brewing up together. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread after Linda's honeymoon surprise. Tom and I had hoped for some peace, but it was clear that wasn't happening. Two can play at this game, I thought. The next day, I called Tom's grandma, Ruth. If anyone could outmaneuver Linda, it was her. "Hello?" Ruth's voice crackled through the phone. "Hi, Ruth. It's Emily. I need some advice. Or maybe more like a partner in crime." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "What's she done now?" I explained the situation, how Linda wanted to join our honeymoon, and my plan to call her bluff. "I think we should invite you along, make it a family affair. Linda wouldn't dare to go if you were there, right?" Ruth's laugh was loud and clear. "Oh, Emily, that's devious. I love it. Count me in." Tom walked in as I hung up, raising an eyebrow at my grin. "Why do I have the feeling you're up to something?" "Because I am. I talked to Ruth. She's coming on the family honeymoon," I air quoted, which means Linda will back off. "You think that'll work?" "It has to," I said, though my confidence was more for show. We didn't tell Linda about our surprise, because she's not the only one who can surprise. The next time she came, we were sitting modestly on the couch and barely restrained ourselves from winking at each other. Linda looked at us suspiciously, but didn't say anything. She continued to admire the future honeymoon for three, offered a bunch of crazy ideas that were supposed to cheer up. When Linda finally left, promising to get back to us, Tom let out a long whistle. "Think she'll change her mind after all?" "I hope so, for our sanity's sake. However, there is little hope for this." We laughed, but the tension didn't fully lift. This was just one battle in what was shaping up to be a long war, but at least for now, we had the upper hand. The first few days at the ski resort could have been ripped from a romantic movie if it wasn't for Linda, my mother-in-law, who stuck to us like glue. Personal space was a concept as foreign to her as subtlety. No matter where Tom and I went, Linda was always there, right on our heels, insisting on just happening to show up wherever we were. She didn't give us a chance to be alone. One day, she knocked on our door late at night just because she missed us. Well, yes, because she hasn't seen us for 2 hours. Then, Linda asked Tom to help her choose skis, which took a good half a day. In the end, we only had time to have dinner, and tired of her endless chatter, immediately fell asleep. This is not how I imagined the marriage journey. Our honeymoon was starting to feel more like a group outing, and any chance of romance was quickly getting buried under the snow. But everything changed the morning Ruth, Tom's grandmother, arrived. We were just finishing breakfast when Ruth sailed in, a burst of energy in the quiet room. "Surprise!" she announced, her voice breaking through the awkward silence that had settled between Tom, Linda, and me. Linda's fork dropped with a clatter. "Ruth? What on earth are you doing here?" Ruth flashed a bright smile, removing her gloves with a flourish. "I thought I'd take up that family trip idea. This place is simply delightful." I watched Linda's face turn from confused to horrified. It was clear she hadn't anticipated this twist. "But you can't stand the cold," Linda said, a tremor in her voice. "Oh, I find the cold quite refreshing, and it's been years since I've hit the slopes." Ruth's eyes twinkled with mischief as she sat down. Tom squeezed my hand under the table, a silent cheer for the unexpected ally who'd swooped in just in time. Ruth commandeered the conversation, filling the space with stories and laughter. Linda, meanwhile, was unusually quiet, her earlier enthusiasm to chaperone every moment of our day vanishing. Out of Linda's earshot, I leaned toward Ruth and murmured, "I can't thank you enough for coming." Ruth gave my hand a gentle pat. "I'm just enjoying my holiday, dear. Anything else that comes from it is just a bonus." As we all stood up from the table, Linda lagged behind, her steps slow, a stark contrast to her previous eagerness. With Ruth's arrival, the tension that had been building like a pending avalanche seemed to ease. The honeymoon was back on track, or at least that's what it felt like in that hopeful moment. As the days slipped by with Ruth firmly by our side, a new routine took shape. Mornings were for the slopes, afternoons for the cozy fireside chats, and evenings. Well, evenings were when the real show began. One night, it all came to a head. Ruth had been pressing Linda's buttons in the most grandmotherly way possible, cloaked in concern and sugar-coated words. Linda, in her desperate attempts to remain the picture of politeness, was a simmering pot on the verge of boiling over. We were all gathered in the lounge, a usual gathering spot after dinner, and I noticed Linda's smile twitching as Ruth recounted tales of Tom's childhood mischiefs. "Oh, Linda, you would have laughed to see Tom as a little tyke, always with his head in the clouds." Ruth cackled, her eyes twinkling mischievously. Linda forced a laugh, her grip tightening on her tea. "Yes, Ruth, children are such a handful, aren't they?" Ruth's next words were like a velvet glove with an iron fist. "They surely can be. But the real task is knowing when to let them be their own person, don't you think?" That did it. The room seemed to hold its breath as Linda's cup clinked onto its saucer. "I think," Linda began, her voice laced with a forced calm that fooled no one, "that a mother knows best when it comes to her own son." Tom's hand found mine under the table, a silent plea for strength. I squeezed it, bracing myself. Ruth leaned forward, her voice soft but carrying. "And what about when that son is a grown man, Linda?" The lounge was silent, every pair of eyes sneaking glances in our direction. Linda stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "A mother's job is never done," she declared, her voice a crescendo of frustration. Ruth simply looked up at her, not a single wrinkle of concern on her forehead. "If you say so, dear." With that, Linda stormed out, the echo of her outrage bouncing off the walls. The tension broke like a snapped ski pole, and the room erupted into hushed laughter and snickers. Tom's grandmother just shook her head, chuckling along with the crowd. The rest of the night was a blur of whispered jokes and shared glances. Even Tom and I couldn't help but let out a few suppressed laughs, the absurdity of it all finally sinking in. Linda, once the puppeteer, had become the marionette, and the whole resort had front-row seats to the spectacle. As we retired for the night, Tom wrapped an arm around me. "I've got to hand it to Grandma. She sure knows how to put on a show." I leaned into him, a smile spreading across my face. "Yeah, who knew our honeymoon would include live entertainment?" As the door closed behind us, the muffled sounds of the still chuckling guests assured us that the tales of this evening would be woven into the resort's history, a legendary battle of wills with a snowy backdrop. The quiet that welcomed us home was a stranger after all that noise at the resort. It was weird, but I found myself half missing the drama. Half. It was a lazy Sunday morning when the phone rang, shattering the silence. I glanced at Tom, who shrugged and mouthed, "Don't answer it." But something nudged at me, a little voice telling me this call was different. "Hello?" I said tentatively. The voice that came through was shaky, like the owner was trying to hold it together. "Hi, it's Linda." I tensed up, a reflex by now. Tom's eyes were on me, filled with concern. "Hi, Linda," I managed to say. There was a deep breath on the other end, and then, "I've been doing a lot of thinking." I waited, not trusting myself to speak just yet. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she continued, the words seeming to catch in her throat. "For everything." I blinked, stunned into silence. I didn't realize how overbearing I've been. Seeing Ruth and, well, hearing myself at the resort. It was eye-opening. Tom was now by my side, his hand reaching for the phone, but I waved him off. This was one conversation I needed to finish. "It's been a lot, Linda," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "For both of us." "I know, and I can't change what I've done, but I'm going to try to be better. For you, for Tom, for us." The sincerity in her voice was new, like a layer of ice had finally melted. I found myself taking a step toward forgiveness. "We appreciate that, Linda. It means a lot." There was a sniffle from her side, and then, "Thank you for being so understanding." I smiled, a genuine smile this time. "Thank you for calling." As I hung up, Tom was looking at me with a mix of awe and relief. "Was that for real?" I nodded. "I think so." She sounded different. He wrapped his arms around me. "So, what now?" "Now," I said, feeling the weight of the past lifting. "We give her a chance, and we enjoy our peace." Tom chuckled. "Yeah, I could definitely get used to this quiet." The future suddenly seemed a little brighter, a little more open. Maybe, just maybe, we'd all come out on the other side of this mess as a real family. And in that moment, I believed it was possible. My name is Anna, and if my life were a book, you might say I was just about to turn to one of those pages where everything flips on its head. 2 years ago, I snagged a coveted position at Lawrence Enterprises, and that's where I met Michael, a few years my senior, and the sort of man who didn't just climb the corporate ladder. He built his own. Our affair was the office's best-kept secret. Michael was cautious, but charming, and I was swept up in it all. But life has a funny way of laughing at your plans, doesn't it? Despite all precautions, I got pregnant. I remember sitting there in my apartment, the pregnancy test in hand, thinking about how a single plus sign was about to add so much to my life. When I told Michael, he ran through a whole gamut of emotions: panic, fear, a brief moment where he seemed genuinely excited. But then reality set in, and his excitement turned cold. "We have to get married," he said finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence. It wasn't a proposal, more like a business arrangement, and it certainly wasn't what I had dreamed of. His parents, devout Catholics, insisted on it. They said a baby needed a proper family. So, with reluctance, Michael agreed to an engagement, and just like that, we were planning a wedding. Today, the living room buzzed with our parents discussing wedding plans. My mother, Elaine, was fussing over the guest list, while my father, David, was trying to understand the seating chart. Michael's mother, Susan, had her heart set on lilies for the church. "And the lilies have to be white," Susan said with conviction, glancing my way. "Symbolic, pure." I shifted uncomfortably, the unspoken implications of white lilies hanging in the air. "You okay, dear?" Elaine asked, placing a comforting hand on mine. "Just a little tired, Mom," I smiled, but my eyes found Michael, who seemed more interested in his phone than the conversation. Michael's father, Peter, grunted, looking over his glasses. "Son, you sure about all this?" It was a simple question, but Michael's hesitation spoke volumes. "Of course, Dad," he said, but his eyes finally met mine, and I saw the storm brewing behind them, a storm I was not yet prepared to weather. Just when I thought the day couldn't get more tense, Michael's facade began to crack. The conversation buzzed around the room, but Michael stood up, his chair scraping back with a sound that seemed too loud for the moment. "Everyone, I need to say something," Michael announced, his voice cutting through the chatter like a knife. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. "Michael, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but it trembled despite my efforts. He looked around the room, his eyes stopping on me last. Then, as if he were pulling something from his pocket with a flourish, he held up his phone for all to see. "This," he said, waving the phone like he had just uncovered a grand secret. "This is the truth." I squinted at the phone, confused. It was a picture of me sitting at a cafe with my ex-boyfriend, Alex. I remembered that day. Alex had reached out wanting to congratulate me on my pregnancy and upcoming marriage. We had coffee, laughed about old times, and parted as friends. It was innocent. But Michael's words twisted the story into something unrecognizable. "Anna has been lying to us all," he declared. "She's been cheating on me, and this kid," he paused, pointing at my swollen belly, "is not mine." My world stopped. "What? Michael, no! You know that's not true!" My voice broke, my protest sounding feeble even to my own ears. Michael's mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while my parents looked from me to Michael and back again, trying to piece together the narrative he was spinning. "Anna, is this true?" My mother's voice was a mixture of confusion and hurt. "No, Mom, it's not," I said, but my words felt like they were getting lost in the sudden storm of accusations. Michael's father stood up, his face hard. "You've brought shame to our family," he boomed at me. "We welcomed you in, and this is how you repay us?" "Please," I pleaded. "Let me explain. It's not what it looks like." But Michael didn't want explanations. He wanted an out, and he had crafted it, leveraging the photo as his ticket to freedom. "I won't marry a cheater," Michael stated, looking at his parents rather than me. "And I won't raise another man's child." My mother came to my side, her arm around my shoulders. "Anna wouldn't do this, Michael. You know her better than that." "Do I?" Michael sneered. "It seems I didn't know her at all." His parents nodded in agreement, their faces set like stone. My father tried to speak up. "Now, let's all take a step back and—" But Michael wouldn't have it. "The wedding is off," he cut in, his voice cold. In an instant, the future I'd imagined, no matter how hastily cobbled together it had been, crumbled to dust. The weight of the betrayal, the injustice of it all, it was almost too much to bear. And as I stood there, surrounded by the broken pieces of what should have been one of the happiest days of my life, I realized I was alone in this storm. The days after Michael's accusation were a blur. Whispers at work turned into full-blown gossip. I walked through the halls, feeling eyes on me, the weight of their stares almost as heavy as my belly. My parents were my shelter in the storm. "Honey, don't let them get to you," my mom would say, squeezing my hand. "We know the truth, and that's all that matters." But it wasn't all that mattered, because Michael was spreading his story like wildfire, and his version was the only one people seemed to believe. One day, I walked into the break room to a sudden hush. I knew they had been talking about me. I grabbed a cup of water, my hands shaking slightly, trying to ignore the burning of my cheeks. "Anna, we're so sorry about what happened." Lisa, a colleague, finally broke the silence with a pitying look. "Michael? Well, we just can't believe it." "Yeah," Tom chimed in, leaning against the vending machine. "We thought you guys were the real deal. Tough break." I bit my lip, holding back tears. "Thanks," was all I managed before I left the room, their eyes following me out. When the day ended, I was the last to leave. The office was quiet, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That's when my boss, Miss Garrett, found me. "Anna, do you have a minute?" she asked, her tone neutral. I nodded, too tired to speak. "In my office," she said, and turned on her heel. Miss Garrett's office was a stark contrast to the rumors outside. It was quiet, calm. She sat down across from me and looked me straight in the eye. "I've known you for 2 years," she started, "and I've known Michael for longer. This doesn't add up. What's going on?" I exhaled slowly, the truth bubbling up. "I met with Alex, my ex, but it was just as friends. Michael took a picture and used it to call off the wedding, claiming he's not the father." She frowned. "Why would he do that?" I shook my head. "I don't know. He's convinced everyone I'm a liar." Miss Garrett leaned back in her chair. "Well, I don't buy it. If you need anything, time off, a change of environment, just let me know." Her words were kind, a small beacon of support, but they couldn't fix what was broken. "Thank you, Miss Garrett. I just need some time to figure things out." The next morning, things took a sharp turn. I woke up to contractions. Stress had driven me into early labor. At the hospital, my mom held my hand as I brought my baby into the world, a beautiful, healthy baby boy. "You're so strong, Anna," my mom whispered as I cradled my son. I looked down at his tiny face, his little fingers wrapped around mine. "We're going to be okay," I told him, but in my heart, I knew the hardest part was yet to come. The hospital room was quiet, save for the occasional beep of a machine or the distant sound of nurses' shoes on the linoleum outside. My little boy was here, 2 weeks early, his cries filling the room with life. Despite the circumstances, it was impossible not to feel a surge of pure love looking at him. "Anna, he's perfect," my dad said, peering over my shoulder to get a better look at his new grandson. His voice was rough with emotion. I smiled wearily. "He is, isn't he?" Mom was bustling around, straightening things that didn't need straightening, her energy a contrast to the stillness in my limbs. "What are you going to name him?" I hesitated. The name Michael and I had picked out together now felt tainted. "Noah," I said suddenly. "After my grandfather." Dad's eyes misted over and he nodded. He'd be proud. We were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Miss Garrett, my boss. She stepped in tentatively, holding a small blue teddy bear. "I heard the news. I hope it's all right that I came by," she said, offering a small smile. "Of course, Miss Garrett." "Thank you," I replied, grateful for her presence. She handed me the teddy bear. For Noah. He's going to need someone to watch over him. I chuckled softly, the sound mingling with Noah's soft cooing. I think he's already got plenty of that. Miss Garrett's expression turned serious. Anna, there's something else. I don't want to burden you now, but I think you should know. Michael's been acting strange at work, taking personal calls, being secretive. It doesn't sit right with me. I frowned, holding Noah a little tighter. What do you mean? Just keep your eyes open, okay? And remember, you have allies. I nodded, the exhaustion from birth and the emotional toll of the past few days making it hard to process. I will. As she left, my parents sat on either side of me, forming a protective cocoon around Noah and me. We're here for you, Anna, for both of you, Mom said, her hand warm on mine. I looked down at Noah, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful sleep. I know, I whispered, and that's everything. But in the back of my mind, Miss Garrett's words echoed, a warning that the storm might not be over just yet. Soon I returned with my newborn son to my parents' house. My father, a practical and wise man, looking at how much I spend on diapers and other children's needs, noticed that the child also has a father. To my questioning look, he replied that I needed to do a DNA test and confirm Michael's paternity. Armed with my father's advice and a determined spirit, I found myself standing on the doorstep of the house where Michael and his parents lived. I clutched the folder containing the DNA test paperwork like a shield as I rang the bell. Michael's mother opened the door, her greeting far from warm. What are you doing here, Anna? I steadied my voice. I want to talk about the paternity test. Michael appeared behind his mother, his face clouding over with anger. You're still on about that? Yes, I said, unfazed by his tone. It's not just about us, it's about Noah. His father emerged, a stern look on his face. Let her in. Let's hear this. Inside, the air was tense, the three of them facing me as I stood my ground. I'm not leaving until you agree to the DNA test, I stated. Michael scoffed. I won't be part of this charade. His father, however, cut him off. If you have nothing to hide, you'll do the test. We raised you better than this. Michael's mother nodded in agreement, surprising me. She's right. This is about the baby now. Their insistence seemed to corner Michael, and after a long, heavy silence, he finally agreed. Fine, but when it shows I'm not the father, I want you out of our lives for good. I simply nodded, knowing full well the truth would come out. You'll get the details from my lawyer. As I turned to leave, his mother's eyes met mine, a complex mix of emotions passing through. I left with a sense of victory, not for myself, but for Noah, who deserved the world and more. The courtroom was awash with a tense silence as everyone waited for the judge to speak. He cleared his throat, his eyes scanning the document in front of him. After reviewing the DNA test results, it is the conclusion of this court that Michael Harris is indeed the father of the child. Michael's parents gasped, his mother's hand flying to her mouth. Whispers snaked through the onlookers as Michael sat, white as a sheet, unable to look at anyone. But Your Honor, interjected Michael's lawyer, this doesn't address the public allegations made against Mr. Harris concerning the mother's alleged infidelity. The judge looked sternly over his glasses. The court acknowledges the seriousness of the allegations. However, the DNA test... Before he could finish, the doors opened, and Miss Garrett, my boss, strode confidently to the front with a security officer by her side, a USB stick held up like a winning lottery ticket. Your Honor, if I may, there is further evidence that needs to be considered, she interjected. The judge nodded. You may proceed. The courtroom's attention was glued to the screens as the video began to play. There was Michael, my once loving fiancé, in the office, his arm a little too low on the back of a colleague, a woman from a wealthy family known in our company. Miss Garrett spoke firmly. Your Honor, it appears Mr. Harris had another motive for his accusations against Miss Bennett. He sought a relationship with a more financially lucrative partner and used the photographed meeting with her ex to construct a false narrative. The courtroom erupted into chaos, people trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. Michael's lawyer attempted to protest, but the judge raised his hand for silence. Michael's mother turned to him, betrayal written all over her face. "Michael, how could you?" Her voice cracked. It's not like that," Michael stammered, but the video left no room for excuses. His father stood up, his voice shaking with fury. "You brought shame on us, son." The judge called the room to order. It is clear Mr. Harris's actions were premeditated and callous. Not only has he attempted to evade his parental responsibilities, but he has also defamed Miss Bennett's character. We will reconvene to discuss the ramifications of Mr. Harris's actions. Court is adjourned. As people filed out, whispering and shaking their heads, I stood there, my heart heavy but vindicated, Noah cradled in my arms. This chapter of our lives was closing, and a new one, filled with hope, was beginning. The days following the court's verdict were quieter than I had ever experienced. With the truth laid bare for all to see, the once overwhelming cacophony of gossip and judgment from colleagues and so-called friends had faded to a hush. Then came a day that would set in motion a change I hadn't anticipated. A tentative knock on the door while Noah was napping in his crib. Standing on the threshold were the last two people I expected to see. Michael's parents, Susan and Peter Harris. The lines on their faces seemed deeper, etched with regret. "Anna, we know we have no right," Susan began, her voice quivering as she clutched her husband's hand. "But we're here to apologize. To you and to Noah." Peter nodded, swallowing hard. "We've been misled by our own son, and we've hurt you. That's unforgivable." I led them into the living room, the air thick with tension. They took in the scattered toys, the pictures of happier times, the evidence of a life they had tried to reject. "Why should I believe you now?" I asked, arms folded, my stance guarded as I stood by the mantelpiece. "After everything, why come here?" They exchanged a glance, and it was Peter who responded, "Because we were wrong, and because Noah is innocent. He shouldn't suffer because of his father's actions, or ours." I took a deep breath, the sound of Noah's gentle breathing from the baby monitor a reminder of what was at stake. "You hurt me. You both did. It's not just about believing you, it's about whether you can be trusted with our son." Susan reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn photo of Michael as a child. She offered it to me with a trembling hand. "This was Michael on his first birthday. We were so full of hope then. I guess we still want to feel that with Noah." Peter's voice was low, filled with a father's grief. "We don't expect forgiveness, Anna, but we'd like to try to make things right. We'd like to be a part of Noah's life, with whatever boundaries you set. We'll respect your wishes, no matter what." We sat there, the three of us, grappling with the weight of what was being asked and offered. Noah stirred on the monitor, a soft coo breaking the silence. I sighed, the fight draining from me. "Okay, but we take this one step at a time. Slowly. Noah doesn't need more upheaval." They agreed readily, relief evident in their posture and the way they finally met my gaze. As days turned into weeks, their presence became a cautious constant. They were there for Noah's first words, his first steps, always respectful, always aware of the boundaries I had put in place. And somewhere along the line, the ice thawed, allowing for a fragile new beginning. We were not the family any of us had envisioned, but we were slowly knitting together a tapestry of trust and affection, for Noah, and perhaps, in time, for ourselves too. Life has a funny way of coming full circle. After everything that happened, the last thing I expected was a chance at a fresh start. As I stood in the park, watching Noah chase after the autumn leaves swirling on the ground, my phone buzzed. "Hey Anna, it's Alex. Got a minute?" I glanced at Noah, ensuring he was safe, and then answered, "Hey Alex, sure, what's up?" There was a pause, and I could picture Alex's thoughtful frown, the way he always looked when he had something important to say. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about you really, and what you've been through. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I admire you, Anna. You've shown such strength, and I was wondering if you'd like to meet up sometime, just the two of us?" I felt a flicker of surprise, warmth spreading through me. "Like a date?" He laughed softly. "Yeah, like a date, but no pressure. I just think we've got a lot more to talk about than the past. Watching Noah giggle as he played, a sense of hope bloomed within me. I think I'd like that, Alex. Let's do it. Great! How about this Saturday? We could grab coffee, he suggested. I smiled, feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in ages. Coffee sounds perfect. As I ended the call, I felt Noah tug at my coat. Mommy, look, I caught a leaf. I picked him up and spun him around, his laughter infectious. You sure did, sweetie. Noah's eyes were bright with joy, and in that moment, I knew we were going to be okay. Life had thrown us a curveball, but we'd caught it and thrown it right back. Now, it was time to start anew, not just for Noah or for me, but for the possibility of what lay ahead with Alex. With the park's golden hues around us, I realized that this was more than just a new chapter. It was a whole new book, and I was ready to start writing it.